Xtalks connects professionals in the life science, medical device, and food industries with useful content like webinars, job openings, articles, and virtual meetings to help you succeed in your career. This life science focused podcast brings together some of our editorial staff to share insights into the latest B2B industry news to keep you up to date.
Hello and welcome to the Xtalks Life Science podcast. I'm Ayesha Rashid, Senior Life Science Journalist at Xtalks.com, and this week I'm joined by Vera Kovacevic. I'm also joined by some very special guests on our show this week as well. We have Joshua Cohen and Justin Klee, who are the co-founders and co-CEOs of Amylyx, as well as Chris Aiello, who is Amylyx's General Manager of Canada. Amylyx is a pharmaceutical company based in Cambridge, Massachusetts, that is dedicated to the development of therapies for neurodegenerative diseases. Amylyx pursues unconventional approaches through lasting collaborations with industry leaders, scientists, doctors, and research organizations. On September 29th this year, Amylyx received FDA approval for its oral fixed-dose medication, Relyvrio, for the treatment of adults with ALS. In addition, a few months earlier in June, the medication had received conditional approval to treat ALS in Canada, where it is marketed under the brand name Albrioza. This was the treatment's first approval by a regulatory authority in any country. So to talk more about the approval of Relyvrio and about the great work being done in neurodegenerative diseases at Amylyx Pharmaceuticals, let's turn to our special guests, Joshua, Josh, Justin, and Chris. So first off, I'd like to welcome you to the show.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd like to just start off by asking Justin and Josh, what inspired the both of you to co-found Amylyx, and what was that journey like?
Well, I thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate the opportunity to get to talk about Amylyx and our plans, and I think ALS and neurodegenerative diseases broadly. So Josh and I started Amylyx almost 10 years ago now, and it was really started around what we thought was an unexplored approach to potentially treating neurodegenerative diseases, which is focusing on a fairly straightforward question, which is, in these diseases, why do neurons degenerate and die? We see that people's nervous systems are having challenges that lead to motor dysfunction or dementia, or these very profound challenges. And we thought, well, if we could maybe try to slow that process or stop that process, maybe that could be a therapeutic approach. So that was really the impetus for starting. I think that quickly changed from not just scientific curiosity, but to a real mission as we met the doctors and researchers and nurses working in the space, and then certainly people living with ALS and their families who just show the most remarkable courage and selflessness in the face of a really tough diagnosis. So we're so proud of what we've been able to accomplish over the past 10 years, but we also plan for it to be just the start. So we're excited to get to talk about some of that today.
Wonderful, and we're excited to learn more about Amylyx and the journey to Relyvrio. So really amazing. And Chris, can you share when and why you decided to join Amylyx as well as the General Manager of Canada?
Yeah, sure. Thank you again for having us and for having me on the podcast. I think that one way back in, I guess now it feels like about 10 years ago, but it was only late in 2020. I started having some preliminary conversations with the team at Amylyx. And then I actually spoke with all of the team members at the time, which I think were about 20 folks. And what really struck me was everybody shared a common vision, and that vision was to help people. And as I started getting deeper into the conversation, I actually came across a podcast with Josh and Justin. And in that podcast, Josh and Justin were speaking to a reporter, and they said that they had gone from when they saw a signal in the therapies, which is now Relyvrio, or Albrioza, they went from a hypothesis to a responsibility to people. And as soon as I heard that, I said to myself, wow, that's something in a place that I need to be and I want to be.
Wow, fantastic. And so we'd like to learn more about Amylyx as to why it's such a great place to be. And I know that, of course, the company is focused on neurodegenerative diseases. And so specifically, can you tell us what therapeutic areas are currently in the pipeline at Amylyx?
Sure. So, I think as Justin and Chris may have shared as well, we care tremendously about ALS to start. We've gotten to know so many people living with this disease, so many doctors who, it's a really tough space to be emotionally, day to day, to deal with the patient population and work with the patient population who's facing so many difficulties, at every juncture. So I think we as a company going forward, one, we want to continue to innovate and to continue to make progress in ALS, both with further research, but also with interaction with the community. We've seen in ALS that things such as diagnosis take way too long, and patients have all sorts of challenges accessing things that can really help them, whether that's wheelchairs or speech assist devices and things of that nature. So we really want to be a partner to help tremendously on that side. And then I'd say additionally, with this drug being approved, we do believe that it's worth trying in additional diseases and has good scientific rationale in additional diseases. So far, we've conducted a small study in Alzheimer's disease that showed some really interesting biomarkers and interesting biology. We're planning to conduct a study in a very rare syndrome called Wolfram syndrome, where there's a lot of scientific data that suggests that the treatment approach could be a good one. And then we're continuing to look through. Unfortunately, so many neurodegenerative diseases have so little. Many neurodegenerative diseases have no drugs approved, and we're continuing to look through those and find the ones with the best scientific rationale for us to go into. And that's something we're going to be doing a lot in 2023 and 2024, is continuing to study this drug and continuing to learn, who it might benefit.
We'd like to say, of course, congratulations to the entire team at Amylyx and to all who were involved outside of the company as well in getting US FDA approval for Relyvrio for the treatment of adults with ALS. And we'd like to learn a little bit more about ALS. What are the initial symptoms of this disease, and what does ALS progression look like in a patient?
Thank you very much for asking. And I think helping to educate more around this is something that we're very passionate about. And thank you for your kind words too. We're very proud of our the approvals in the U.S. and Canada. So ALS is really relentlessly progressive and fatal neurodegenerative disorder. It's caused by motor neurons dying in both the brain and spinal cord. And those are the part of your nervous system that is responsible for muscle function. And so as that part of the nervous system degenerates, everything that your body uses muscles for, people lose that function. So for example, it leads to the inability to move, to speak, to breathe on your own, and eventually it's fatal, usually within about 2 years of diagnosis. So it's a very, very fast disease. We know that it's quite a complex, heterogeneous disease as well. And so I think something that we're very passionate about is trying to continue to be a partner that can help translate things from this scientific, from understanding from the bench to the clinic, as I think we're strong believers that in order to keep making really strong advances in ALS, we're going to need combination treatment in the same way we've seen in other areas, like in different forms of cancer. But that being said, we're really proud of what we've done so far, and we think this is a important new treatment option for a community that has had very few so far. But as I will probably keep repeating, I think all of us very strongly believe this is just the start.
And I'd like to learn a bit more about Relyvrio in terms of what it targets specifically in the disease, its mechanism of action, and how its development journey came about.
Yeah, great question. So, I'd say ultimately, we have beliefs about the mechanism and otherwise, but, first of all, these things are hard to ever know 100% for sure. In neurodegenerative diseases like ALS. We developed the drug with the idea of targeting some of the key pathways underlying neuronal death. Some of those pathways that we were most interested in include that the mitochondria, which is often referred to as the power plant or energy producer of the cell, is also one of the key areas of the cell that can decide to send the cell down a path of death. And there are a number of triggers that can influence that. And the thought was, to have a compound that might kind of target that pathway to prevent those triggers from sending the cell down that path. The second, Relyvrio is made up of two compounds. The second compound targets the protein folding center of the cell. And similarly, in a lot of neurodegenerative diseases, we found that there can be this accumulation of poorly folded or unfolded proteins, and proteins have to be kind of in the right folded shape to have the effect that they're supposed to have. When the cell finds that there's too many of these unfolded proteins, it similarly can drive the cell down a path of death. So the second compound we designed to address that. All that being said, I think this is an area we're continuing to learn about. I think especially as we're looking towards other neurodegenerative diseases, we're really trying to dig in deep to figure out, in addition to ALS, might these mechanisms, might these pathways be relevant, useful in additional diseases as well?
And I'm sure you get this question a lot, but it's hard to sort of bypass it. But in the last several years, or several years ago, there was the whole campaign, the awareness campaign around ALS, of course, with the Ice Bucket Challenge and all of that. And so I'd like to know how that's translated into helping, number one, bring awareness around the disease, and also funding wise, are those things that helped bring Relyvrio to where it is today with the approval, and how has that, did that whole thing impact sort of the space, and did it impact Amylyx in any way as well?
Oh, well, I'm so glad you asked. And very simple answer, we would not be here if not for the Ice Bucket Challenge.
Wow.
And we are so grateful to Frates and Pat Quinn and the Frates family for their leadership in really revolutionizing ALS. I think the Ice Bucket Challenge brought such needed awareness of ALS and funding as well. And to tell a little bit of our story. So we thought we had a promising treatment approach, but one, we're young founders, and that probably is a risky investment proposition already. And two, we were going after ALS, where sadly there hasn't been as much in the way of successful treatments as in other areas. And so it was a tough financing road. Very fortunately, we got a grant early on from ALS Finding a Cure and the ALS Association, much of the funding for which came from the Ice Bucket Challenge. And so now, all those years later, it's turned out to be a approved therapy for ALS. And I think we're just one example of many in how the Ice Bucket Challenge galvanized the community. And we were then even more tremendously honored that Jim Frates, a very experienced biotech executive, joined our team and of course is part of the Frady's family who is behind that amazing effort. So in short, we wouldn't be here if not for the Ice Bucket Challenge, and we're so grateful. I think the other thing that's happened is the science has been accelerating at just a tremendous rate, really like we've never seen before. And I think so much of it can be traced back to that movement. And so we're now starting to see the fruits of that wonderful advocacy effort. And we're one of them, and we believe and hope many more to come.
That is truly fantastic. Just to see something like that really translate into concrete action and results. I think that's so amazing, and I'm really happy. And again, congratulations to Amylyx for having brought Relyvrio and having the approval. And it just goes to show just how much I think just working together, like people in all spaces, I think that's really what this highlights. And again, it's so amazing to see this. And I wanted to ask, so Relyvrio is actually marketed under the brand name Albrioza in Canada. And so, Chris, following it was the first approval by a regulatory authority in any country, so by Health Canada. So how have things been since that approval, and how has the progress been following the launch of the therapy in Canada? And what have you learned from that? Has that helped to sort of get into other markets and things like that?
Yeah, thank you for the question. The launch of Albrioza in Canada, the receptivity of this therapy in the country has been wide and deep. I think when you think about the patient population, people living with ALS, and you have the privilege to bring a therapy that shows statistical significance on function, as well as the survival seen in the OLE portion of the study, you look at that and patients living with this disease that don't have very many options, you would imagine that that's a very it's actually hard to explain in the sense of just how many people are interested, the questions, the families, the discussions. To answer your question, it has been, in my career, something that I haven't yet to see, just in terms of the engagement with this community.
Wonderful.
And the other thing that I would add there is, from our team here in Canada, being the first global regulatory, we kind of like to take Albrioza or Relyvrio and say it's a made in Canada story. So again, we had the privilege to be the first global regulatory filing here. We're also the first area that will have real world evidence generated out of the use of Albrioza. And also the API is made in Canada. So we call it, an adopted, we're made in Canada story, and we're extremely proud of that.
I love that. That's wonderful. And to overcome barriers to access, Amylyx has made the decision to price the medication below the last FDA-approved ALS treatment. And so that's a very wonderful, kind act from Amylyx. And what sort of motivated you to sort of make that decision and to, really make the drug more accessible to patients? And what was the sort of thought behind that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so I'd say throughout the whole process, we've been really lucky to get to know some incredible patients, incredible doctors, and we really wanted to, we didn't want to fumble on the finish line, right? At the end of the day here, we wanted to make sure that after everything everyone had put in to moving this product, through clinic, all the advice, all the research that we had done, we wanted to make sure that people would have access if the drug was approved. And so we were very thoughtful about, both our decision on pricing, but then also our decisions around the additional support that we could provide people. So for example, in the US, we've had a pretty robust financial assistance program where that talks to people living with ALS and helps if there are any financial challenges accessing the product. And we're very committed to try to work through for every single patient to try to work through those challenges as best we possibly can. And similarly in Canada, we've also been very forward about trying to address any financial challenges or burdens that might be on people living with ALS. So, I think that's been a really strong goal for us. And, I think the other thing we see, launching a drug is that, we don't just want to be a company that delivers a drug and nothing else. We want to use that momentum to try to change as much as we can, the problems that face people living with ALS, just beyond therapy as well. As I was saying, diagnosis takes too long, and there are just a whole list of other challenges and problems that people face every day. We really want to be an advocate and champion for every patient we possibly can be.
And what are some of the short-term and long-term goals at Amylyx now? What do you have planned that for the future after Relyvrio and or with Relyvrio moving forward?
Well, I said I might sound like a broken record, and I think I will, but we really feel like we're just getting started. I think first, we feel a deep responsibility, as Chris said, to ensure that every eligible person can have access to the medication. So that's really our priority number one, certainly in Canada and the US, where the product's approved. I think a second one is that there are people with ALS all around the world. And if we have a medication that can help, then we have a responsibility to get it to them. So that's a huge area of focus for us as well, and we know how precious time is too in a disease like this. And so we always try to work on one of our advisors and friends who's sadly passed away used to talk about the ALS clock and how much faster it is than the regular clock. And so we always try to remind ourselves of that and work on the ALS clock. But we also think that that's just the start. Diagnosis takes far too long. Can we advance ways to diagnose faster? Caregivers don't get the support they deserve. Clinics are underfunded and undersupported. And further, we want to get to a point where we don't have ALS anymore. Maybe at first we make it a chronic managed condition and then eventually cured. And the way we're going to do that is to keep reinvesting in research. So we have certainly our top priority in front of us right now to deliver this treatment effectively. But then quickly after, we need to keep pushing to do better and better for the community.
Wonderful. Well, I'd like to thank the three of you for joining today on our show, for being on our show today. We really appreciate your time, and it was such an insightful discussion and conversation, and really wonderful to learn more about Amylyx and Relyvrio and just all of the fantastic work that's going on at Amylyx, and that you're at the helm of and leading, and truly being at the forefront of ALS research and drug discovery, and to really have an impact on ALS patients. So thank you for all of the work that you do, and thank you once again for being on the show.
Thank you so
very much.
Thank you. Now that's the end of this episode of the Xtalks Life Science podcast. Thank you once again to our guests from Amylyx for sharing their work at the company. And if you liked today's show, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Thank you, everyone, and see you next week. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Xtalks Life Science podcast. If you enjoyed our discussions today, please share the episode with your friends and colleagues, and be sure to subscribe in order to be notified when a new episode is released. To join in on the discussion, you can find Xtalks on social media, email podcast@xtalks.com, or comment on the articles directly. Links are in the show description. Take a moment to join our community at xtalks.com to get access to everything we have to offer, including webinars, job listings, virtual meetings, articles, and more. The views and opinions expressed in the podcast are those of the speakers sharing them. They should not be taken as professional advice and do not necessarily reflect the policy or position Honeycomb Worldwide. For further information, email us at podcast@xtalks.com. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.